Welcome back to Old School Sports, and we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to start thinking about OOTP 23. It's March 19th today and of 2022, and OOTP 23 should be released in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Latest I've heard from OOTP is they're still targeting sometime before the end of April, which means that we're hopefully 4 to 6 weeks away from being able to jump in and play with a completely revamped collective bargaining agreement, and also teams that are metamorphosizing dramatically before our eyes with all of the trades and free agent signings over the last week or so. So I am a Yankees fan, enjoy playing the game with the Yankees, but also like to play it with more challenging potential teams than a huge payroll, big market team like the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Mets or the Dodgers. So the goal of this episode is to give a little thought to some teams that may be more challenging to play in OOTP 23 when it's released. Now, since the game isn't out there yet, going to use OOTP 22 as kind of the basis for the video and our conversation. But think that if you're looking for a interesting team to play that might be a little more challenging than those big market teams with huge payrolls and stacked rosters, hopefully this episode will give you a few ideas of things to think about. I'm not naming these teams in any order. I'm going to be going east to west through the different divisions, starting in the National League and then in the American League. So the first team that I think is going to be a good challenge in 2023 out of the park baseball is the Miami Marlins. Not shockingly, perhaps. This is a team that was in fourth place last year, about 21 and a half games behind the division winners in the National League East. And they have a very small market, very weak fan loyalty, low fan interest. They're constantly going to be competing with big market teams like the Mets, the Braves, the Nationals, and the Phillies that can outspend them. Obviously, over the past 3 decades, the Marlins have won 2 World Series championships when they brought in some young talent and added in some veterans and spent some money. But each time after winning those World Series titles, they blew the teams up quickly, getting rid of the highly priced veterans, and then also in some cases even selling off the young talent relatively quickly. Derek Jeter recently stepped away as president. Seems like Bruce Sherman was not spending enough money to make Derek continue wanting to be part of the organization. And it's unlikely that their payroll is going to increase significantly, and probably unlikely that there's going to be a ton of interest in at least this type of baseball, Miami Marlins baseball, in the South Florida area where there are a lot of transplants who have their own loyalties, and the Marlins just have never, except when they have occasionally been extremely competitive, been able to draw a ton of people into the park. The good thing about the Marlins is that you have a pretty well-loaded farm system. A lot of good young pitchers, Max Meyer, Edward Cabrera, Sixto Sanchez. So you have talent that you can groom over the coming years and hopefully build a pretty good rotation, but you're still always probably going to be having less money to spend than some of those really big market teams that you're competing with in your own division. So I think this is a pretty interesting challenge. I did play the Marlins on this channel in OOTP 22, so I will not be picking them as the first challenge I bite off next season, but definitely an interesting one to consider. Second team that I think is a great challenge potentially in OOTP 23 will be the Pittsburgh Pirates. Actually a very similar situation to the Marlins. Small market, weak fan loyalty, low fan interest, and a payroll that is going to be among the lowest in the game. The issue with the Pirates is that penny pinching fiscal personality of owner Bob Nutting. If that doesn't change, they're always going to be a challenge, particularly if you're playing with harder trade settings or in challenge mode. The Pirates, similar to the Marlins, actually do have some pretty strong prospects in their system. So over the next few years, Henry Davis at catcher or O'Neill Cruz at short, Nick Gonzalez, Quinn Priester, Rusney Contreras. There's definitely talent in their system. Probably a consensus top five minor league system if you were to look at a broad swath of those types of rankings. So there's youth here, similar to the Marlins, but also similar to the Marlins. This is a 61 win team that was 34 games out of first last season, is always, as long as Nutting is owning the team in OOTP 23, probably going to have one of the handful of smallest payrolls. So it's an interesting rebuild for people to take on, and so from that perspective, I think it's going to be a good challenge because you're going to really have to build things properly and probably cycle with players to win consistently. And you're always going to have the specter of a big market team, a huge market team like the Chicago Cubs in your division, in addition to even some of the smaller market teams in your division. Cincinnati even is probably always going to have a bigger payroll than you. Milwaukee most likely is going to have a bigger payroll than you. And then the Cardinals are a classic baseball franchise with a lot of loyalty from their fans that you're always going to be competing with. So I think the Pittsburgh Pirates are another good challenge if you're looking to do something where you're not necessarily going to be winning a World Series every season in OOTP 23. Another team that I think will be a good challenge in OOTP 23 is the Cincinnati Reds, who are in the same division as the Pittsburgh Pirates. But unlike the Pirates and the Marlins, who I've already talked about, Cincinnati has kind of a middling farm system right now at best. This is a team that actually had a winning record last season, although they were still 12 games out of the division. But in recent weeks, they have traded away Jesse Winker, traded away Sonny Gray. Nick Castellanos just left them as a free agent. So they have built up some additional prospects by making those trades, which helps the middling farm system. But you are still a relatively small market team that is certainly not in win now mode. And you've got to hope that the trades that you've made in recent weeks with the Mariners and Twins provide some players who really become big-time major league players for you to be successful. The ownership situation with Bob Castellini is a little bit better than the ones that we've talked about with Miami and Pittsburgh, assuming that OOTP doesn't change these profiles, which is certainly possible. But at least from a fiscal personality, rather than being a hardcore penny pincher like Bob Nutting, Castellini is at least only an economizer, so a little bit easier from that perspective. But you are a small market team similar to the Pirates, and you don't have nearly as good a farm system. So I think that the Reds are also a good challenge for OOTP 23. Moving out to the National League West, another team that I think could be a good challenge in OOTP 23 is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Tied with the Orioles for the worst record in baseball last year, only 52 wins, finished 55 games behind the San Francisco Giants, and have to deal with not just the division champion Giants, but also a Padres team that probably will be much better. And then, of course, the big dog on the block of all of Major League Baseball in terms of the Los Angeles Dodgers, with a massive payroll, huge fan base, and a ton of great young players, not only at the Major League level, but still a pretty strong farm system also. So, real tough spot for the Diamondbacks. They do have a pretty good farm system. Jordan Lawler at shortstop could become a big-time player for them. Corbin Carroll or Alec Thomas in the outfield, also good prospects. But at the major league level, you've got Carson Kelly at catcher. You've got an aging Madison Bumgarner. There's just not a ton of exciting things there to play with. So I think that the fact that you're also going to be competing in that difficult NL West, and you have an owner in the case of OOTP pretty demanding as far as patience and a controlling fiscal personality. It's definitely not an easy play. So I think that the Diamondbacks are a fourth team that could be a good challenge for people looking for a challenge in OOTP 23 when it hits the stores. And the final National League team that I think could be a real interesting challenge to play with in OOTP 23 is the Colorado Rockies. Similar to the Diamondbacks, you're in a division with the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Padres, who are all way ahead of you in terms of the talent they have on the major league roster right now. The Rockies got Herman Marquez, and then they just made that Chris Bryant signing that has everyone in baseball scratching their heads as to, are the Rockies trying to win now after they haven't paid people for the last few years, or what the heck are the Rockies doing? The positives are you've got an above average market size with good fan loyalty and fan interest, although that could change when we get into 2023. We'll see how that has evolved over the past year in the eyes of the programmers and the analysts at OOTP. Not a great situation with the Monforts owning the team. And you have a mediocre minor league system. Zach Veen and Drew Romo, probably the top two prospects. They're both probably also, a few, if not several years away from being able to make an impact for you. So it's a team that certainly hasn't gone all in on winning for this season, despite the signing of Chris Bryant. You look at what's going on with other Rockies players, and it doesn't seem like they're all in this year. And you're competing in an extremely tough division with teams with much bigger payrolls than you. I'm just not sure what the long-term play is here. And then the other thing about the Rockies is you have to deal with the elevation of playing in Denver, and you have to kind of build a pitching staff that can keep the ball inside the park in that thin air in the Mile High City. So I think they're a real interesting challenge because they probably have, with the exception of maybe Cincinnati, the worst minor league system of any of the 5 National League teams that we've mentioned, in a very challenging division where you're always going to be chasing after the Dodgers, and a roster that could be saddled with a Chris Bryant contract that in 3 or 4 years is a big millstone around your necks. Moving to the American League, I think the Baltimore Orioles are potentially a very interesting challenge in OOTP 23. Likely going to have one of the smallest, if not the smallest, payrolls in baseball as the 2022 season begins. And you are in a division where you know that the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Blue Jays are most likely always going to be outspending you. And then you also have to deal with Tampa Bay, who has the proven model to put a winning team together while not spending tons of money. Orioles, with their 52 wins last year, were 48 games out of first place behind the Rays in the American League East. You have a difficult owner for the time being still with Peter Angelos, demanding patience and a controlling fiscal personality. The one thing that helps the Orioles is you've got an incredible farm system, one of the best ones in the game, with Adley Rutschman, who could become a prototypical OOTP catcher with hopefully good offense and really good defense. DL Hall, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg, Grayson Rodriguez as far as a pitching prospect along with Hall. So there are definitely some assets in the system to help you with the rebuild and to be helping you at the major league level over the next few seasons. The issue is, though, unless you kind of manage those players perfectly and build up your attendance, build up your fan interest over time so that you can get a larger payroll eventually from Angelos, if you can't do that, you're kind of going to be on the cycle of just kind of having players until they hit free agency and then not being able to keep them. So you're going to need to kind of keep improving the farm system, keep cycling good players through, and then trading them off before they become free agents to get some assets for them, which can be a very, very challenging cycle to pull off correctly. The Orioles are a team with a great history. Won multiple World Series over the years, and had a lot of great players over time. Cal Ripken Jr., Jim Palmer, Brooks Robinson, Frank Robinson. Tons of talent over the years that has gone through this organization, but with the current economics of Major League Baseball, even with the great farm system that they have, it's going to be a challenge, I think, with this team to build a consistent and sustained winner. Moving to the AL Central, I think the Cleveland Indians are a potentially interesting challenge. This is a team that did win 80 games last season, but is likely going to be heading into 2022 with one of the smallest payrolls in all of baseball. Do have a solid farm system, a lot of top prospects, several shortstops who will, eventually be likely moved around to other positions in Tyler Freeman, Brayan Rocchio, Gabriel Arias. Have Daniel Espino, George Valera in the outfield. So there are good, solid prospects in the system to help you. But until you can get that payroll up, it's going to be a significant challenge. The ownership of the Dolans, Larry Dolan, similar to what we've seen from a lot of these other teams that are challenging, with not a ton of patience and not a ton of generosity in terms of the money that they're going to let you spend. So in a division where the White Sox are really strong, Cleveland is going to be battling with the Detroits, the Kansas Cities, and the Twins to just remain relevant. And I think that it's another interesting challenge here potentially for the upcoming year of OOTP baseball. Moving north a little bit and down to the team that was third in the AL Central in 2021, the Detroit Tigers are also a decent challenge. The payroll here should be bigger than with the Indians, the Guardians, which is positive, and the ownership position is a little more advantageous with Christopher Ilitch, who at least in last year's version of the game had lenient patience, giving you a little more time potentially to make the changes you want to. The farm system, probably not quite as good as Cleveland's, but some of the top-end talent in terms of Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green is pretty strong. And then Jackson Jobe, first-round pick from the past season, be interesting to have an opportunity to develop him. But it seems like a lot of these teams in the American League Central, with the exception of the bigger spending White Sox, you just have to kind of nail it perfectly in terms of timing the growth of your minor league players, getting 3 or 4 or 5 good young players kind of on a similar timetable in terms of having low contracts, and then supplementing that with some free agent signings to kind of fill in the gaps at reasonable levels is the way to hopefully build a team with the Tigers or the Guardians that can be competitive for a few seasons and hopefully win you a championship or two while you're playing with them. Moving a little further west, but still staying in the American League Central, I think the Kansas City Royals are going to be a challenging team to play with in OOTP 23 also. Real similar story to both Cleveland and Detroit. You've got a middling farm system. The top-end talent with Bobby Witt Jr., C.J. Melendez, Nick Pratto, maybe even Asa Lacy is interesting. But your payroll is not going to be huge. You look at the roster. You've got Salvador Perez, who is awesome. Great offensive catcher, excellent defensive catcher, coming off of a absolutely monster season. But then other than that, you've got kind of a bunch of average, decent major league players. It's nice that they signed Zach Greinke, but you just traded away Mike Minor for the pitching staff, so not clear exactly what you're doing. Bringing back a player in Greinke who started his career with the Royals, but I'm not sure exactly what the end game is there. Are you really, going to go from fourth to first in the AL Central this year? Similar to some of those other teams, ownership not great to deal with, demanding patience, controlling fiscal personality. John Sherman definitely not going to make things real easy for your team. So another challenging situation that I think would be a good challenge if you're looking to have to work for it in OOTP 23. And finally, the last team that I want to mention that I think could be a great challenge to play with in OOTP 23 is the Oakland A's. This is an 86-win team from last year, but if you've been following baseball over this kind of first week since they signed the agreement, have already traded away Chris Bassett, Matt Olson, Matt Chapman. Rumor is that Sean Manaea is going to be gone soon. Already have a pretty small payroll, and it's conceivable that by the time OOTP 23 comes out, the A's could have the lowest payroll in all of baseball. You also have a small market size, have an owner that, although lenient on the patience, makes it a little easier for you to keep your job, is still like nutting with the Pirates, a penny pincher as far as the fiscal personality. So it's always going to be difficult as long as the Fishers are owning the team for you to generate a huge payroll, and that's going to make it challenging. The farm system also, until the recent trades, was viewed widely as one of the worst in baseball. Now you've added Christian Pache, you've added Shea Langoliers, a lot of other players in the other trades, and potential to get something if you do end up dealing with Manaea. So the farm system is going to be better than it was just a week or two ago, but you still are ultimately a small market team with penny pinching ownership, a major league roster that may be one of the worst, if not the worst, as you start the 2022 season, and just have to hope that you can develop a lot of these young players that you've recently gotten in trades to become high quality major league talent, and that your head of baseball operations, Billy Beane, can continue to work his magic alongside you as the general manager or manager of this team in OOTP 23. So that is my list of 10 teams that I think could be real interesting challenges to play. Miami Marlins, the Cincinnati Reds, the Pittsburgh Pirates, Colorado Rockies, Arizona Diamondbacks, Baltimore Orioles, Cleveland Guardians, Detroit Tigers, Kansas City Royals, and the Oakland Athletics. Two other teams that I did consider were the Minnesota Twins. Didn't include them on the list because they have been real active kind of trying to reshape things in the trade market, and they just signed Carlos Correa to that 3-year contract. So I think they are a little less challenging with some of the talent that they now have at the major league level. And the Rangers, although they're coming off an awful 60-win season, that is still a team that has money to spend, still has a decent payroll, and with Jack Leiter and Josh Young, some top-end talent in the minor league system. So I think that those are two other teams that I considered that I thought could be challenging that I didn't consider as the first 10 teams that I mentioned. Would love to hear your thoughts below on teams that you think could be challenging in OOTP 23. And obviously, 5 or 6 weeks from now when the game is hopefully released, we'll have an opportunity to play some of these challenging teams and maybe find out that some teams that I did not think of are also going to be a little more challenging to play with in the game. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.